Hello, everybody. This is Jan Blanchard with PCC's Pediatric Solutions Consulting Team. I am joined today by Brandon Betancourt. As you can see his smiling face just there, we are preparing to overcome some technical hurdles, and we're going to get started with his session on exemplary customer service. So if you are prepared, Brandon, to share, we can take it away, and I'll dispense with the housekeeping. I'll deal with all that after we're through.
All right, so we're ready to go?
Take it away. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. We are going to be talking about customer service today. But before we do that though, before we jump into the actual material, what I wanted to do is ask some questions. And I'm trying to get, so I want to ask a few questions. The first one is show of hands. How many of you have had a great customer service experience? And by great customer service experience, let's define it as an experience where you told a friend, a family member, a human being. So I think that my friends at PCC are going to be putting a poll up and let me know what those numbers are. By the way, this fine-looking gentleman, Ethan, every single PCC support staff member that you call, when you have an issue, it looks as good as Ethan. They don't usually parade them around because they're just too darn good looking, but they all look like this. This is one of the qualifications. They have to look as good as Ethan to work in support, by the way. Do we have results of how many people have had some great customer service experiences?
We do not just yet. We just barely got it up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's true, right, that most everybody looks like Ethan in at PCC?
Absolutely.
Yes, I know. Yes. I know that I've had my fair share of great customer service experiences. I'm trying to think of a very good one, but usually if I go into a story, then I'm not going to finish because so I'm not going to go into a great story, but yeah, I'm sure that
just one or two votes so far.
All right, well, that's good. So the point here is that people have had good customer service experience. That's what I wanted to highlight here. And then the flip side to that is the next question that I wanted to ask is kind of like a show of hands, is how many people have had a horrible customer service experience? And by horrible, let's say that you told somebody else about it that was so bad, but let's say that it was so bad, we'll define it that you thought you were on candid camera. And if you didn't get that reference, we'll say that you thought you were on Punk'd.
Good clarification. I was trying to think of a real corollary for these days.
Right. And if you still don't know what Punk'd is, then let's say that you are, I don't know, you got pranked by Logan Paul. How's that? So yeah, horrible customer service experience where you thought that that it was actually a joke. It was that bad.
And we have exactly one vote as well, also having had a terrible, awful, horrible customer service experience.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for participating. So the point that I wanted to make here, so generally speaking, when you look at polls, the majority of people have had great customer service experiences, but generally speaking, more people have had bad customer service experience because they're more likely to tell people that they've had a bad experience versus they've had a great experience. So that's not unusual. But what I would like to point out, and because I'm kind of the person that I like to step back, see where everybody else is going and kind of go the other way. So I find it interesting that we're really good at identifying what good customer service is and what bad customer service is, but we don't always generally do a very good job of delivering it, right? So my bet is that if we were to go back to that person that said that had a horrible customer service experience, and we would go back to that person that delivered the terrible customer service, whether it was a retail place or if it was a restaurant, or if it was a customer service agent on the phone, or maybe perhaps a support agent from another EMR company, I don't know. And if we were to go and speak to that person and ask them these same questions, they would probably also answer that they have had a good customer service experience, and they would also have a bad customer service experience. So I often think about it as meals. Like, we don't necessarily have to be a chef in order to identify if a meal is good or not. Now, I'm not talking about taste, whether if you like sushi or chicken or something like that. I'm talking about, we can all agree where something is a good hamburger or something is a good, I don't know, another food. But we don't necessarily have to be a chef in order to determine that. Well, customer service is very similar to that, in the sense that we can all identify, regardless of expertise, when something goes well and something goes bad. But as I was saying, we don't often identify, we don't often, but not everybody delivers great customer service. So, why is that? It's always very interesting to me, is it that we can recognize it. However, we don't often, not everybody does it very, very well. Now, changing subjects just a little bit, I have the privilege to visit many, many practices all over the United States, pediatric practices. And when I go to these practices, they look like this. They're very, vibrant. They're very pretty. They're very welcoming. They're very, very, very nice. When I talk to the staff, they're like, hey, I'm going to take a picture. Everybody perks up. Everybody smiles. Everybody, is warm and very welcoming. Obviously, this was taken a while back. They still had medical records when I took this picture. And then we have, people like Nancy here, also, very cordial. She's got her Jiffy or Jif peanut butter there, ready to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Again, very nice, very cordial, and seems to be ready to serve. Now, when we look at when there's surveys done about customer service, healthcare actually is not very up there. It's not very, it doesn't get put against some of the other industries that do very well with customer service, like hospitality or something like Disney or anything like that. In fact, oftentimes what they do is they put us with the airline industry and with the whole airport experience, believe it or not. And if you think about it, there's not a whole lot of differences between the whole airport experience or airline experience versus going to the doctor's office. There's long waits, right? There's long delays, very little information. People don't really know sometimes what's going on. So at the airport, you'll see that you'll go up to one of those signals or one of those, the information boards. They'll say flight is delayed, but there's no explanation as to why it's delayed or how long it's going to be delayed. Well, in the medical office, the doctor's running late. No explanation as to why, how long it's going to be or anything like that. You'll go up to say, ask an agent at the airport, and they'll say, it's due to weather. The delay is due to weather. And you look outside and it's bright and sunny. And you're, what's the reason for that? For this weather delay? What do you mean weather delay? And of course, nobody explains to you that the flight from Thailand that was raining last night didn't make it to Seattle, and there's a crew from San Diego that was going to meet the flight from Seattle, and then that's why your flight out of Omaha, Nebraska is actually delayed due to weather, right? Because there's this whole intricate sort of system, and then it's all connected, and hence the reason why. But in healthcare, it's very, very similar. We have all these, long lines, except we don't often see them because sometimes we have people waiting in the waiting area. This is, of course, pre-COVID. And then some people are waiting in the exam room. So you don't necessarily see everybody but for the most part, there is a very long queue of people waiting to be seen. Whether it's on the schedule, or whether it's in the office, or whatever the case might be. But in the airline world or the airport world, at least if you're traveling for leisure, you kind of put up with this sort of thing for the most part, because especially if you're traveling for leisure, there is the you're perhaps going to visit a family member, you're going on vacation, you're going to a destination, and so there's something to look forward to. The problem with healthcare is that it's kind of like the lost baggage claim desk at the airport. And by that, I mean that nobody that approaches the lost baggage claim at the airport is down there to thank the agent because their bags arrived on time at the same time they did. I used to work for the airlines. I used to work at O'Hare, actually, at the time when O'Hare had the title as the busiest airport in all of the United States, or maybe the world. I don't quite remember. So they used to pay extra for the agents that worked at the lost baggage claim, because everybody that came to that desk was angry and had a problem that you had to solve. And I hate to break it to you, but everybody that comes to the office, to your office, to my office, to any office, doesn't really want to be there. They would, if given the chance, they would rather go somewhere else, because quite frankly, it's not a pleasant experience. And I know that there's many kids that do like their doctor, and there might be a little kid that has a crush on one of the nurses and everything, and oh, here's my little buddy. But even a wellness visit that is a good thing is not necessarily a pleasant experience. We take your clothes, we poke you, we look into, different places, orifices, your eyes, your nose, your ears, your throats. If you're a teenager, we ask uncomfortable questions. Even as an adult, when you go to a wellness visit, it's not, it's a good thing, but it's not necessarily a pleasant experience. So in healthcare, it's very difficult to deliver great service, exceptional service, because first, the system is already kind of not really designed very well to provide great customer service. And we're already starting very low, in the sense that people are not necessarily enthusiastic about going to the doctor's office, because the majority of the people are there because there is a problem. And they're, the mom might have been up all night with the baby, and then they might have had the mom and the dad might have had a fight, for example, before going to the doctor's office, deciding on who was the one who's going to take the kid. And then the dad's like, well, I got a big presentation at work. I've already used 5 days of my PTO. And then the mom is like, well, I do too. My boss is kind of getting upset because I've taken too many days off, or whatever the case might be. And then they're having to take the kid because we can't figure out why the fever is persisting for X number of days, right? So these are sort of the dynamics that we are up against. And then we're there and like, welcome, it's like, have a good day. And like, there's nothing good about this day. My kid, is driving me crazy, and I can't figure out why. Nobody can figure out why he's not getting better. So that's sort of the dynamic that we are facing, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about, is this thing moving? Next. Okay. So first I put this slide up that healthcare is changing. And then I said, you know what? Healthcare has changed already. And this is, I'm not talking about COVID either. I'm talking about even before COVID, healthcare had changed completely. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and what were some of the things that has been leading up to this change, because there's different things that have been happening that that I think are worth mentioning, that I think that we should be talking about. So the first thing is a shift in patient demands. So I think that what parents are expecting on the delivery of healthcare has completely changed in recent years. Obviously the internet has played a big role. And the information that people have access to is very important. Convenience now is among the biggest drivers. So I often say that you're only good as your last diagnosis. So if it's fast and convenient, then that's how you're being measured. In fact, the Google reviews, the Yelp reviews, the Facebook reviews, it's very difficult for a parent to discern whether or not a doctor has the skill set, the clinical skill set over another doctor. So they measure us on whether or not it's easy for them to get in and out of the doctor's office, whether or not, they get their medications, whether or not there's a quick turnaround when they request a refill. Those are the ways that they're able to measure on how well the practice does, as opposed to, well, my kid was retracting last week and nearly dying, and the team took care of the kid and saved his life. That's not necessarily what they look when they're doing their Google reviews. And then of course, just simply the Google's reviews, the Yelp, Facebook, those are also becoming very, very important on how people are making decisions, or patients are making decisions on where they have to go. And then we have the sort of other situation, which is the consolidation in the mergers and some additional items that are also contributing a lot on how it's shifting healthcare. Again, now these are changes that have been happening for a very long time, and I know that in prior PCC conferences we've talked about this. In other conferences like PMI, we've also talked about this, so it isn't necessarily new. So that's why I said I wanted to change that graph to say not that healthcare is changing, that healthcare has already changed, and it's just a matter of us adapting because our patients have changed, the expectations have changed, and we're also having to deal with all the other industry changes that are happening. But I want to spend time talking about the first three items here that I have, and what is it that I think that is driving those three items primarily. And I also think that we don't talk enough about this. I've seen it mentioned here and there a little bit, but we are not, I don't think that we're spending enough time talking about this. Now, for all I know, perhaps it's been addressed during the conference. I just haven't been seeing some of the presentations, but at least prior to this, I had not seen it being addressed very often. And here are the ones I think are the culprits. If I can get this, go ahead, here we go. Here are the culprits of the first three items that we are discussing in terms of the shift in patient demands, the convenience being one amongst the biggest drivers, the Yelp reviews, the Google reviews, the Facebook reviews, and then we'll address the consolidation and mergers in a little bit later. So who do we have here? We have the millennials, right? So there's a lot to talk about the millennials, and millennials, they get a lot of bad rap. And oftentimes, there's just a lot of chatter about the millennials, but let's just do a little bit of, let's just take a look at this demographic and why I think this is very important on why we should be learning more about this demographic. So this demographic has been born between 1981 and 1996. So this puts them around 23 years old to 38 years old. Now you can look it up online. Some of other research institutions will put them between 26 and 40 years old. So there is some gap, some overlapping gap in terms of when exactly you draw the line. In my research, because I've been doing a lot of looking into the demographics with Generation Z and then the millennials. One of the things that they have discovered is that in the past, they used to do generations in kind of decades. Now what they're doing is that they are making the changes based on significant events in society. So for example, a significant event like 9/11 will, depending on how old you were during a significant event like 9/11, will actually, that would be the mark moving forward on how you perceived and how you grew up and kind of what happened afterwards. So those are sort of the milestones that they are now considering in terms of when they're marking when the next transition for the next generations are going to take over. So like if you don't remember 9/11, that's different than somebody that actually did remember, was a child when 9/11 versus somebody that was an adult during 9/11. So that's kind of where the difference is, and that's why you see some of the discrepancies in terms of the age and some of the overlap. But the Pew Research Center decided a year ago to use 1996 as the last birth year for millennials, and that's what they're going to be using moving forward in their work. And I thought that the Pew Research would be a good resource to cite as a resource. So here's, when you think about this age group, not so much when they were born, but then what events happened as they were growing up. Although so many of them were born into the digital world, right? So, the iPhone wasn't invented in the 80s, but many of them, whereas they were growing up, already had whether it was, maybe not an iPhone, but they had like a flip phone or something like that, or they were able to use the texting one that flipped up, and I can't remember which one. I can't remember the name of it, but anyways, the one that was or like a BlackBerry or something like that. So they were already, texting. Many of them grew up with online banking. Amazon, later became already established, like I think in 95 or 96 is when they, so if they were born late 80s or and they were already growing up, so Amazon already was part of their lives, right? And this is also very important. They are currently the largest generation ever in history, okay? So that's why I think it's very, very important. So when you look that they're the largest generation, and with the research that I was looking into, it mentioned that 48% of millennial women between 20 and 35 were moms in 2016. So here you have the largest generation in history so far, and half of them were women between the ages of 20 and 35 in 2016. That's a few years ago, obviously. I would imagine that the number is bigger now. That essentially is our demographic as pediatrician, right? That's the people that we need to focus on. That's the ones that we are going after. That's the people that we need to understand. Now, in a prior life, I used to also work in marketing. And in marketing, essentially, that's what you do. You go after your target audience, and you know everything there is to know about that target audience, so that you can then meet their needs, so that you can sell the product and be able to tailor messages specifically to the needs of that demographic. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look a little bit about them, and what makes them click, and how they view healthcare in particular. So I have a few slides here from research that I found. 47% of millennials are more likely to ask for a generic form of medicine. Okay. 35% manage healthcare expenses through a budget, and 57% check their plans to ensure coverage, which I thought was very interesting, because for the longest time on SOPM, for example, and I participated in these discussions as well, there was a lot of criticism that patients wouldn't take a look at their health benefit coverage, their package that the insurance gave them, go through it. So they would complain that, why are you charging me for this? Or why isn't the vision screen covered? And we would always say, man, I wish they would actually look through their plan benefits, and then they would know what is covered and what is not covered. But so here we're seeing that well over the majority of them check their plans to ensure coverage. Now, to back up just a little bit, remember, we're looking at people that are between 23 and 38 years old. So if you think about what they have experienced during their time that they have been growing up, right? So many of them have either experienced themselves, or they have seen their parents go through the tech bubble. They have seen or have experienced the housing crisis. They have seen the financial crisis of 2018, or seen their parents go through that. And then they have also, which have led to the Great Recession, right? So when you think about what they have experienced themselves, or they have seen their parents go through, which is entirely different than, for example, Generation X and the baby boomers, then it's no surprise that they're much more budget conscious because of what they've seen. They've seen it to a completely different world than what prior generations have seen. And in addition to that, you throw in the technology aspect of it, then you start to understand why some of the expectations that they have, right? So that's why one of the things that the research showed, that they look for something that is cheap and convenient. So the millennials are demanding price transparency in healthcare. So rising deductibles are striking debt-ridden millennials hard and driving many to retail clinics. Why? Because it's very cheap, it's very convenient, and they have a lot of debt, because remember, all these financial crises were going on. Many of them were in school. They couldn't find jobs. The recovery was very slow after the 2008 financial crisis. So many of them went back to school. Their parents were broke because their housing prices, and et cetera, et cetera. They took out loans. So they also have a lot of debt. If we go back a whole bunch of other slides here, you'll see the guy in the middle says, I have $80,000 in school debt. So it's one of the characteristics of the millennials. So of course they are very budget conscious, right? Here's another thing that they do. They don't like waiting. So I guess salty is a reference, bitterness, you know, that in millennial lingo, I suppose. So they look at reviews, and they're not shy about giving people reviews, whether good or bad, online. So more than 60% of millennials share their experiences with their friends when they are unsatisfied with their care. And then this is pretty astonishing. 92% of millennials will switch healthcare providers if not completely satisfied. So my question is, what actually satisfies them? That's a very important to understand. What is it that actually satisfies them? And before they go out looking for somebody to switch over, 54% of millennials will check online physician ratings before seeing a new doctor. Okay, so that's just a little bit about millennials, and I think that again, this is very important for us to understand this demographic, understand what makes them click, what are their needs, and it's very important to cater to them because essentially these are, again, our core demographic, our core. I want to say patients, but they're the parents of our patients. I think you guys don't understand what I meant. So all the data that I just mentioned and the research all came from here. So I put this in the slides so you guys can, you know, dig in with everything here. And actually there's a little bit more in all these little links than what I posted. So, you know, feel free to dig in and take a look a little bit more. And then just a little bit about consolidation. I know that this is a topic that has been discussed in various forms and in different markets. There has been, you know, large networks purchasing OB groups and merging with other hospitals, et cetera. But this is kind of a representation of all of that, where you have minute clinics. I don't know how many there are right now, you know, 1,800 or 20, I don't know, there's like a whole bunch of them, right, all over the place. And you've got Aetna, which is the third largest insurance company. So you've got millions of lives with Aetna, right? So you've got these two organizations together providing what millennials want, which is something relatively economical and something cheap. So, you know, conceivably they can say Aetna, well, if you go to a minute clinic, which is less expensive, you know, we won't charge you this, or we won't charge you that, or be less expensive. They can keep it all in network, and we've got the pharmacy that's right there. And then you can also pick up your, I don't know, your milk and your Doritos, I don't know, and some candy, and also flowers for your wife or something while you're there at the CVS. So clearly that's just a recipe for a humongous disruption in healthcare when you have something like this happening, a merger between these two organizations. So just to put it into perspective, if you've come to any, in the past, to any of the PCC conferences, I'm sure you've heard Chip give something like this, but he'll frame it in the aspect probably of recalls and how one or two extra patients, bringing in one or two extra patients a day will generate extra revenue. Well, if we flip that formula and say that if we lose 2 patients a day as a result of either bad customer service, not giving access to our core demographic, or for whatever reason, and we estimate $100 a patient. Now, before people get angry at me or send me an email saying nobody gets $100 where I live, or I'm 90% Medicaid, nobody gets, okay. That's just a number that I put there because the math worked better. It was just easier to do the math. So you can put in 50, you can put in 60, you can put that whatever your number is. So, but anyways, so if you lose 2 sick patients a day, and that each one of those patients is $100 and 200 work days, provider days, that basically if you take out vacation, weekends, et cetera, and a provider works 200 days in a year, that comes out to $40,000 less that the practice is losing. That is per provider, right? And that's not counting overhead, that's not counting payroll, that's not counting anything like that. So that's just kind of a little bit of math to show you what the financial repercussions of losing patients to whatever circumstances might be. So now that I've painted this beautiful picture, let's talk about customer service. But before we talk about customer service, I think it's very important to understand what is the purpose of customer service, because there are many, you can Google customer service quotes, and you'll get stuff from Jeff Bezos, you'll get stuff from Sam Walton from Walmart, you'll get stuff from Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, and they have awesome quotes. I even thought about putting some of those here in the presentation. And there's steps on what to do. Listen to the person, be kind, de-escalate the situation, empathy, et cetera, which we'll talk to some of those things here in just a moment. But I think that it's very important to take a step back and to really understand what is the purpose of customer service. And if we really strip it all down, it's just bare bones, let's just strip it all down. Customer service is about the effort to change feelings, okay? That is the basics of customer service. Is a person comes in feeling one way, and your job is, or an effort of a team, or your effort, or whatever the case might be, is to make that person feel better than what they were feeling when they first came in, okay? So if they were feeling good, your idea is to wow them and they feel even better. So like, for example, Disney, you're feeling great because it's the happiest place on earth, right? And when you leave Disney, you leave, wow. It's like, oh my goodness, these people hit it out of the park, right? But even if it's a terrible situation where somebody is coming in and it's the lost baggage claim, and then that is your responsibility, is to turn that around and for that person to leave with a much better emotional state of mind than when they originally came. So customer service, once again, the essence of customer service is an effort to change feelings. So I wanted to kind of lay that out there. So how do we do that? So what I did is, as if you saw the title of the presentation, is CARE, right? So CARE essentially is an acronym for, so how I think is the best way to change those feelings and to really put into practice customer service, right? So very simple: compassion, affable, reassurance, and empathy. Those four things are the foundations of customer service, in my view. So let's take a look at that. Let's talk a little bit about those things. So compassion. So if you look up the definition of word compassion, it literally means to suffer together. Among emotion researchers, it is defined as the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering, okay? This research has shown that when we feel compassion, our heart rate slows down. So this is research, when people that study this, that's shown that the heart rate slows down. We secrete the bonding hormone oxytocin, in regions of the brain linked to empathy, caregiving, and feelings of pleasure light up, which often results in wanting to approach and care for other people. Okay, so compassion, when you truly have compassion, it's an urge, it's a need to actually care for other people, and it lights up all kinds of stuff in our minds, in our brains, right? So simply put, if you are in the healthcare field, particularly in a medical office, and you don't have this trait, you're in the wrong business. And I'm not talking about the physicians, and I'm not talking about the nurses, because they generally have this intrinsic value in them, and that's why they chose this profession. I'm also talking to you, front desk person. I'm also talking to you, billing person. There needs to be a certain level of compassion and a desire to suffer together with the patients, and have that sort of feeling of wanting to help other people, to care for other people, okay? It's the basis, it's the foundation of it. It is what we do, health care. right? That's the basis of what healthcare is all about. So this might not necessarily apply for retail, but certainly for what we are doing. There has to be a level of compassion in order to do what we are doing. Now, if this isn't you, there's other areas of healthcare. You can work in a laboratory and take it with look at microbes or whatever it is that the hematology does, or I don't know. So there's other areas of healthcare where compassion is not necessarily required. But again, in pediatrics and what we do, we absolutely need to have this as part of what we do. The other, as you saw with the 4, is affable. I chose affable because affable essentially means, pleasant and friendly. I could have used pleasant and friendly, but it didn't fit with, it didn't start with A. So I had to pick a fancy word like affable. So because I couldn't find anything more simple that started with an A. But basically affable is just being pleasant and friendly. Okay. Here's the thing, like you would think that that's simple, right? It's like, yeah, pleasant and friendly. I got that. We all understand that. We all do customer service, or rather we all understand customer service. We understand what is proper customer service, what is a pleasant experience, what is a inviting, warm experience. But I can't tell you how many times I have walked into a medical practice and this is the face that I get. Right? It's just this poker face when they're like, next. And then they ask me, how can I help you? As if they don't know why I'm there, right? It's like, you have the schedule, you know what the time is, I'm relatively on time, or at the very least, you can say, who do we have here? Right? If it's a little kid, or who are you checking in? If it's the mom, or this is the face when the mom asks, do I have to give my insurance card again? And then this is the face that the front desk person gives, because of course, this is probably like the 5th time that somebody has asked, do I have to give my insurance card again? And so the front desk person is annoyed of the fact that they're having to be asked this question. But it is annoying that the person is asking that question, but if it annoys you and you can't deliver the response with affability, is that a word? If with a friendly and a pleasant, then you're in the wrong position. You can't be then in the front desk. Okay. So a few years ago, with PPMA, if you know SOPM's like little brother, we did a backstage tour of Disney, and it was a great experience. They showed us, like how Disney does a whole bunch of cool things. And one of the things that we learned in that tour is that one of the most common questions that the staff received at the parks was, what time was the 1 o'clock parade? That was the question that they received. I'm not joking. What time was the 1 o'clock parade? And so the staff at Disney could very well give the Kanye face to the parent, right? They were completely justified. But what they understood was that the question wasn't necessarily what time the parade was. They found out that the real question was, where was the parade what was it going to take place? Like, what was the route of the parade? So the staff member, they would do is they would take out a map and they would show them the route of the parade. And then they would also give them tips on where would be the best place. Like, hey, you want to be standing right here because Cinderella is going to come over on this corner and she's going to be able to see you when she runs this corner in, and you can wave to her. So that's the way that they would handle the situation, because they absolutely knew that people were going to ask the question, what time was the 1 o'clock parade? So, and if we were to apply it in our office, if patients are going to ask us, hey, or what do I have to give up? Do I actually have to pay a co-payment? And then you can, instead of giving the Kanye face, you can, give an explanation. Be prepared for that explanation and to do it in a much nicer way as opposed to giving the Kanye face. Okay, moving on. Reassurance. What does it mean to give reassurance? Something that is said or done or make someone feel less afraid, upset, or doubtful. In our offices, we feel comfortable giving shots, the nurse is very comfortable because we do it all day. But if you think about it, it might be very frightful for somebody else. It would be the equivalent if your child, for example, if the principal called you and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about your child." All of a sudden you're like, you're like, well, what's going on? Why can't he tell me over the phone? Why does he need to ask me to come to the office? Why does he need to talk to me, right? So for things that normally would look day to day to us, for parents, it might be completely different. So they might be fearful and because they don't understand what's going on. So like if the nurse calls the parent and says, the doctor would like to see you to go over the results. For us, it might be like, yeah, no problem. The doctor just wants to see you because he doesn't want to give free advice over the phone. So he wants to generate a visit. Let's be honest. That's what we want to do sometimes. But the mom might be terrified on the other end, saying like, why does he want to see me? Like, is there something wrong? Why can't you tell me? So it's very important to the reassurance aspect of it. And by the way, this is one of the things that we do a lot, is that reassurance. And by we, I don't mean we. I'm not a doctor, but when we open up the practice, my wife is a pediatrician, and I've spent a lot of time with doctors. I met her when she was her second year in medical school. And when we opened up the practice, it was like 2 years before we brought in another doctor. And I was working the front desk, she was working in the back. We rode to work together. So when she was on call, I was on call as well, because I would get woken up. I would hear the advice. And what I noticed was, as a self-appointed honorary pediatrician that I am, is that there was not so much, a lot of clinical advice, but there was also a lot of reassurance, so just ensuring, letting the parents know that things were going to be okay. So to do the reassurance part, it's also understanding the emotion behind the emotion, so that you can reassure them that things are going to be okay, and to also be able to manage expectations. So the reassurance aspect is very important on what we have to do. And again, this doesn't only apply to the doctors. It also applies to the billing staff. It also applies to the front desk when patients are starting to get a little agitated because they're having to wait, or when parents are on the phone and they're trying to get in and you're trying to find, and there isn't any availability because they waited too late for their school physical, and now we're jam-packed, and they have 2 days before little Timmy now decided that he wants to be on the wrestling team, and in the sports participation form, he has to have it before he's able to do the training or whatever the case might be. So again, these are all situations that also apply to the front desk and all the other the other positions. Moving right along, empathy. Oh my goodness, empathy is so important as well. So empathy is the ability to detect others' emotions and understanding their perspective. Now, to be clear, it's not about adopting people's feeling and making them your own. That's a very important distinction, but rather considering other people's feeling and making decisions accordingly. Okay, so it's about considering other people's feeling, not making them your own. That's the difference. Some people confuse the empathy portion about that. So just a really quick example here. I know I'm running a little bit out of time, but with the whole COVID thing, there was a large group that I was working with that had multiple offices, and they had two practice administrators, or two managers rather, that were managing a couple of offices each. And so the management, the partners had told the managers to inform the staff members that there were going to be layoffs coming as a result of the COVID situation. So one manager, we'll call him Manager A, not necessarily very a people person. The other one was a little bit more of a people person. So they had to relay the message. So Manager A gathered his staff and basically just laid it out there and just said, hey, listen, there's going to be, things are tough, and you guys better be prepared because most of you are going to be laid off. Then that was the end of the message. The other gentleman, a little bit more a people person, and his approach was, hey guys, I'm very worried about the situation. I'm very conflicted. Things are, pretty bad. We're going to probably have to make some really difficult decisions. But I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out, but I will definitely keep you guys informed and updated as soon as I know information. So what were the results? The people that Manager A managed, they were, upset, angry, They threw up their hands. Productivity for that office and those offices went down the drain. Productivity for the offices that manager B managed, they were actually supportive of the manager. They were like, we understand, is there anything that we can do? We understand that things are difficult. We're all in support of the practice. Anything that we can do to help, that's great. But, we know that it stinks. We know these are terrible circumstances, but we absolutely completely understand. Same message, same information. One was delivered with empathy. The other one was not delivered with empathy. Now, you say that isn't necessarily a customer service sort of thing with patients, but I will argue, or not necessarily argue, but I will point out the fact that we also have internal customers and then external customers. And if you treat your internal customers properly, then those internal customers will do an awesome job with your external customers. So just an example there on how that how that plays out. So I've talked about the four, the acronym. So let me give you some practical tips here on how to kind of apply some of these things. So customer service tip. So the first thing that I would recommend, and this actually takes some time, but customer service is not a department. And what I mean by that, it's not a compartment where you can just kind of like take it out and put it back in. It's something that needs to be part of the practice as a culture. It's not like, well, you need to talk to the customer service department. Everybody is the customer service department. It has to be part of the culture of the organization. So to deliver great customer service, it has to be woven into the fabric of the practice. Okay, you can't have just the front desk be great at customer service and then the billing staff be not courteous, not be affable, not be compassionate, not be empathetic, right? Or vice versa. It doesn't work that way. Or if you see, there's so many online reviews where they'll say, the doctor is great, but the front desk is awful. Those people are so mean and so rude. I'm sure if you search or if you look at that, you'll find a lot of that. And that's why customer service has to be part of the culture of the organization. For example, in our practice, we have made it a staple. We have made it a core value so that we can refer to it. We can hold people accountable about it. And we also make decisions based on that because it's a core value. And for example, one of those decisions is that we hire people that can smile. You think, I'm joking, but that is absolutely true. One thing that we discovered is that we can teach people how to use the EMR. We can teach people how to give vaccines. Somebody can learn to schedule the Bright Futures Guideline. You can teach them how to check people in, how to check people out, but you cannot teach people how to smile. I've tried. You can't. You can't teach people to be compassionate. You can't teach people how to be empathetic. You can't teach people how to be friendly if they are not just naturally friendly. So that's one of the ways of kind of weaving in sort of some of these some of these customer service values into the culture of the organization. The people have to have some of these traits and also train them to be able to uphold some of these customer service value. Let's see how long we're doing with time. All right, let me move on. The other thing is, I talked about healthcare not being necessarily held in high regard with in terms of customer service. So the bad news is that, so there's good news and bad news in that. The bad news is that the healthcare is terrible at delivering, and generally speaking, might not be in your practice in particular, but generally speaking, healthcare, the bar is really low in healthcare customer service. The good news is that the bar is really low in healthcare customer service. So to deliver great service, all you have, the bar is really low. So all you have to do is just kind of go just a little bit above, and now all of a sudden you're ahead of everybody else. So the way to do that is kind of define what is expected and then what is unexpected. So for example, if you're going to be, if you say that you're going to, somebody asks for a form, a school physical form, and you say, okay, I'm going to we'll give you 48 hours to return this form. That's the expectation, right? That you give the parent the expectation. And then if you deliver it in 24 hours, all of a sudden you can actually have a change of emotion, change of feelings, because they were expecting it in 48 hours. And then all of a sudden it comes in 24 hours. And then that email comes in and be like, oh, well, look at that. I got it a day early. So whatever it is that whatever the expectation is, if you can deliver that just a little bit more, the unexpected, that right there is a key to delivering great customer service and coming out ahead. If you can always deliver on the unexpected, and by unexpected, I mean the good unexpected, right? Then that will always give you, put you ahead when it comes to that, when it comes to great customer service. So surpassing the expected, okay? And if you look back at any other customer service interactions and look and examine what went really well, it's generally speaking, you got something that you weren't expecting. They went a little bit above and beyond what the expectation is. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about complaints. Complaints are very uncomfortable, but they are the best things that can happen because you learn from your mistakes. Okay, there's value in the feedback that you receive. It identifies problems and areas of improvement. So when you get that nasty review, the first thing that your instinct is to look at that and be dismissive of. That mom is crazy. That mom just has no idea. That mom, I can't believe that she did that after everything that we've done for that woman. But if you start reading between the lines, there are certain things that I'm almost sure that you can pick out of there and say, you know what, we could have done something a little bit better to have avoided this problem to have been, even avoiding the problem to have escalated. It also provides an opportunity for the parent to give feedback. Sometimes all they want to do is just be heard. So oftentimes I'll just hear them and I'm like, thank you for the feedback. And another good tip is actually, once you heard the feedback, and tell them you're going to be addressing it. And then a week or two, send them an email and say, hey, this is what we've done. We addressed it during our meeting. We addressed it with the staff. And then from now on, this is what we're going to be doing. What that does is that it restores trust. So any sort of negative interaction, I view it as an opportunity to restore trust. And if you look at great customer service interactions, the ones that go bad usually start with bad interactions. And again, going back to changing those feelings, changing those emotions, then all of a sudden you're like, my goodness, it actually went really, really well. So it's an opportunity to restore trust. So complaints are very, very good. If you look at the complaints that we have received online at our practice, a lot of it has to do with the credit card on file and us charging the card. So that is one of our core values. We've kind of stolen that from SOAP and the no margin, no mission. So the credit card on file is a staple of our practice, and we're not apologizing for that. But for example, we will, if we see that somebody complains about that, then I will review the process on how we communicated that to the parent. So perhaps even though the parent should have been aware of our credit card policy, the fact that she took the time to write a complaint about it, then it alerts me to look at our process again and to assure ourselves, or myself rather, that we are indeed making everybody aware that this is a policy that we have in place. So when we started getting these complaints, we made an extra effort to tell new parents, hey, this is a policy that we have. We highlighted it. We made sure. So, and if they didn't want to come, then that's fine, because then they already knew, and then we didn't have to have a situation. So even a negative feedback like that helped me to kind of reassure not reassure, but re-emphasize rather with the staff. I'm like, listen, we got another review. It is one of our core values. We're not going to remove the credit card on file, but could we is there anything that we could have done to let this parent know that, so she would have been better informed of the fact that we have this policy on file? And then we'll usually find out that perhaps we didn't do a very good job of communicating that to her. So anyways, so that's just one example that I can highlight. Mastering the art of listening. So here are just some tips that we can do. Repeating back what I'm hearing you say is affirming, smiling, nodding, or brief verbal affirmations such as I see, or just simply, they sound simple and you're not patronizing them, of course, but the idea is that you are acknowledging what they are saying. For the most part, it is legitimate. Yeah, if you're bringing up a complaint, it is 9 out of 10 times, it is a legitimate complaint. I found this, Tom Peters, kind of a leadership guru guy, that I found this to be brilliant in terms of what listening is. Listening is the ultimate mark of respect, the heart and soul of engagement, the heart and soul of kindness. And if you read this, it really is awesome. I encourage you to read this and take a look at it because we often don't listen enough, and I think this is a great reminder of the importance of listening. Here are some more questions. Can you help me? Can you tell me more? Again, sometimes the issue isn't the issue, so you got to dig down a little bit deeper. And when you have sort of that humility, understanding to be able to reassure, and you have the empathy, and you have the compassion, the wanting to need, the need to wanting to help, rather, then you genuinely ask these questions with truly, genuinely, transparency and understanding to try to help somebody. So these are some questions that kind of help you facilitate that discussion. So it's not a confrontation, but rather a true conversation to understand what it is exactly what the problem is. And then, what would eventually ask them, what would make it better? And if you can do it, then go ahead and do it. And if you can't, then give a good explanation as to why you can't do it. Okay, so here we have the word healthcare. I've always found it interesting that we have the word care in healthcare, and oftentimes, generally speaking, broadly speaking, there's very little care, because there's so much bureaucracy, and there's the insurance company and forms, and we have to check eligibility. There's not a lot of care, if you will, in the healthcare. So what I did is I kind of separated the two words into two words, health and then care, right? So the way that I look at this is that health is really the facts, right? And by facts, I mean diagnosis. Facts are the diagnosis. Facts are how long somebody waited to be seen, lab results, getting a prescription refill, a form completed for school, okay? And care is about how you make people feel, all right? Now, sometimes changing the facts is a shortcut to changing people's feelings, right? But not always. And changing the facts alone is not always sufficient. So like you can squeeze somebody in, or you can see somebody quicker, or you can turn around that form and you can change somebody's feelings, but that doesn't always work out, right? So if you were like, to give a refund on something that maybe you're not supposed to, but you give a refund anyway, just or squeezing that person at the very end of the last day, just like, hey, I'm going to wait for you, no problem, we're still here. All good things, all necessary, all very helpful, but that's more on the fact side. That's what I put it on the fact side. But really, when it comes, again, what customer service is about, it's really about the feeling. The feelings is all that matter. And changing feeling takes humanity and connections, not facts. So think about when you have to deliver terrible news to a family that just has a terrible diagnosis for their child. Doing it just simply on the facts and telling them your kid has ADHD, your kid has autism, your kid has diabetes, and then just leaving it at that, just mere facts, versus doing it with empathy, doing it with compassion, suffering along with them, doing it with care, with connection, and with humanity, and talking to them about that and the difference. Just imagine the difference, right? The two different perspectives of that. Well, that would be of explaining to that parent of that diagnosis. It's a world of difference, right? It's a completely world of difference. The way that the parent is going to view that doctor or view that nurse when you deliver it with a connection of feelings versus connect with just delivering the facts, right? The facts are important. You have to deliver the facts, but those delivering it with feelings. We're delivering with humanity, with a connection, and with the CARE acronym. Maybe not with the friendly, with the affability, but certainly with the other ones, with the compassion, with the empathy, and so forth, makes a humongous difference. So that's what's the big takeaway here. And I know that I'm running a little bit out of time. So here, define how you want to make people feel. That's another big takeaway here, is simply define how you want to make people feel. And last but not least, I just want to talk to because I was talking, about delivering a terrible diagnosis for somebody and doing it versus, the fact versus the feelings. But the front desk person, the clinicians do make a difference, right, in people's lives, and so do the MAs and so forth, and the nurses, but so does the front desk, because what you do, the work that you do, is very, very important, and it matters a lot. Because if you're not there booking the patients and doing it with compassion and doing it with empathy, then the doctor is not going to be able to see anybody, right? You're a big part of that. And if you're not collecting all the information that needs to be collected, then Nancy in the back, right, is not able then to collect properly, or is not able to inform the patient properly, or to communicate the information properly to that parents, to have the empathy, proper empathy, and the proper friendliness to tell them why the person, vision screen went to deductible as opposed to, the insurance being paid for it. So just because, and then the second thing that I want to say, so the work that you do absolutely matters, because it impacts how everything else flows in the back, right? So, and it has to be delivered with that same care. And number two, you are the face of the practice, okay? The majority of the interactions happen with you. And so it is critical, it's very important. The importance that you have, like I said, if you're not there, the practice wouldn't exist. I mean, it would exist, but it wouldn't be the same. I mean, it's very important. Like I'm the manager of the practice. If I'm not there, it doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter. If a front desk person misses out, calls in sick, it's a big problem. It's a big problem. When an MA is gone, if the biller's not there, it's a big problem. When the manager's there, like me, when I'm not there, nothing happens. Nothing gets disrupted. I'm one of the least dispensable. It doesn't absolutely matter, but you absolutely matter. So it's very important, because it's very important for the patients. It's very important for the support of the doctors. It's very important for everything else. So I think I've gone a little bit too much. So thank you for listening.
My gosh, Brandon, that was awesome. Thank you so much for all of that. We haven't gotten any questions through the session, but I think we did have a couple people drop off at the 5 o'clock mark here at 5 Eastern. But I'm so glad that I was able to watch the session today. You have so many great reminders for compassion. I mean, your focus on the importance of compassion in the work that's done in all positions in a practice is so easy to relate to, and you make it. I'm in awe of how easily you equated support for one another with support for patients. That final point that you made about, if you make Nancy in the back's life easier, that affability is going to come more easily to her when she has to deliver bad news, or when she has to give a patient an answer that she would rather not have to give them. This is really just there's so much in here. I'm really, really grateful. This was awesome.
I'm glad.
Yeah. And I just have to share, because I'm a talker and I can't stop. But the revelation that you made, a revelation for me about one of the points you made, was recognizing that patients and parents, that the only thing they have to gauge whether their experience with you was good or bad is their expectations of service. They don't have medical expertise. It never occurred to me that we're all looking for a way to relate, or a way to decide what we think or how we feel. We're taking all that input, and if all that they have is their customer service experience, that's going to be the sole focus of their attention on how they related to you and how well you did.
Right. Well, one of the things I always remember things that I was going to mention that I forgot to mention, but early on when I first started here, and by here I mean the practice, having the marketing background, it was just like, okay, well, how do we make ourselves unique? And I've said this in other presentations before, but the vaccines that we give is no different than the vaccines that the person down the street gives. Our Tylenol is the same Tylenol that they sell at the store. Everything virtually is the same, and it's very difficult to say that my clinician is better than your clinician, right? Like, it's very difficult to kind of put that into to make that argument and to win it really quick, or to prove it one way or the other. But so really the only thing that makes us different than the other office is us. And that's another one of the points that I guess I forgot to make about when I was kind of emphasizing the you matter when I was saying the front desk. But I was looking at the time and I was just like, I need to close this up. I need to close this up.
Oh, this is a recording. If you have time, they'll come back and watch it later.
Okay, well then good. So I was like, so that's why I was kind of like speeding up, trying because I was in that mind frame where like I could see somebody giving me like the in a regular presentation, people are like,
the hook,
giving me the timing. The only difference is us. That's the only thing that is us. And so, for example, in our practice, that's what I've used a lot in terms of like when we decided to do our website. One of our very first, or I guess it was like our second website. We paid a lot of money that time. Now it's easier to do because, there's just a lot more tools. But I got a professional crew to come in and film us working and talking just because I'm like, I need to capture us. How do we do that? And so I talked to the guy that was doing it. And so we did bring in some patients and they talked to like, why do you come here? And then they would just, well, we love Dr. Betancourt because of this, because of that. Because even with the reps or even the guy that, the Hinkley Springs water guy that would come in, like he'd just like sit down and start chatting with the girls. And I'm like, there has to be something there, right? I want to capture that. It might not be for everybody, but I wanted to somehow capture that. And I'm like, well, I wonder if I can capture it on video. And so that's what, we put out there, like, want to know about, well, here's us. Here's what you should come to us. But anyways, it went back to that sort of revelation of me thinking, we got to market ourselves because this is the only thing that we've got going for us, because I can't say, we got a better Prevnar than you guys do. We got a better Rotarix than you guys do. There's nothing, like if you look at anything else, it's like, we like our cars, our car has, this much power or whatever, like, or this is much more, you've got some sort of
measurable
distinguish, like Mars is more luxurious. Mars has this many safety features. Like there'll be some sort of distinguishing factor that you can use and for almost everything else, or a niche, like, well, we are specialized in XYZ, or we're 24 hours or something like that. But in pediatrics in particular, there's nothing really that you can distinguish yourself in because there's nothing unique about us.
It's not easy for sure.
We all do earaches, we all do, sore throats. And then now there's some like,
I think you're selling yourself short, honestly. Hearing you say that your description of the restoration of trust, I've heard people say before, turn a complaint into an opportunity, but there's something very human in the way that you framed that restoration of trust idea. For you to highlight the thing that can improve your interaction with the patient, and not just for satisfaction reasons, but for your own growth, for you to have a deeper understanding of what they value about being a patient in your practice. That says a lot about you. I think you featured exactly the right thing in that video, because if it's you guys that draw it leaves me not wondering at all why people are drawn to your practice, if that's the approach you guys take. This was an awesome look into the way that you do things. I appreciate this.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I hope we can do it again sometime. And thank you for staying late. I appreciate you making extra time for us today.
Yeah, no problem. I know a little bit technical difficulties, but hey, you guys are here doing something that's never been done before.
I appreciate that recognition. It feels that way some days more than others. All right.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.